The NBA regular season is officially in the books, and we take a turn to the offseason, and in Miami's case, the NBA play-in. The fourth year in a row, Miami will be spending its postseason in the play-in, playing to try to make the playoffs, but with a loss, end up in the lottery. And that's where we'll start here. This is where the Eastern Conference play-in actually stands. In shocking fashion, the Magic, as 11.5-point favorites, lost on the road to the Celtics, who were not playing anybody in their real rotation. So they dropped down to the 8th seed with Philadelphia beating Milwaukee. The Hornets ended up beating the Knicks on the road. New York was resting their starters, so they locked up the 9 seed. And even with Miami beating the Hawks and the Wizards to end the year, they end up as the 10th seed and will be on the road to play the Charlotte Hornets. We'll take an early look ahead at that game. But I also want to make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we will be live. It will be on Tuesday night for the Heat Hornets action. It's going to be a lot of fun in that play-in. Despite what you want Miami to do, we'll be live. Subscribe and join us. And let's start with the draft part, and then we'll look into where the Heat could actually win if you think that's the best possible thing for the Heat against the Hornets on Tuesday evening. Miami ends up holding the 13th spot in the lottery. No matter what happens with Portland and the Clippers game that are playing as we're filming this, they will hold the 13th spot in the lottery if they miss the playoffs. And then they have that second round pick that was given to them as kind of retribution for the Terry Rozier debacle by Charlotte. It is the Warriors' second round pick, so it is 41st overall. So, like I said, if the draft ends up happening next week because the Heat missed the playoffs, you'd be picking 13 before the lottery and in 41st, second round overall. You look at the lottery odds for Miami with that 13th overall spot, 4.8% chance to jump up inside the top 4 and 1% chance to move up into the first overall spot. We've seen in back-to-back years, 24 and 25, a team picking between 10 and 14, moving up to that number 1 overall spot. It's incredibly unlikely, but here are the odds as currently constructed for the Miami Heat. But there actually is a golden path to get the 12th spot in the lottery and not the 13th spot. How is that possible? Well, one, Miami has to miss the playoffs, and here is how it actually happens. So Portland will be playing the Suns in the 7-8 play-in game, assuming they beat the Kings as we're filming this. If Portland beats Phoenix on the road, they clinch the 7th seed and are in the playoffs. So they're obviously in. And if the Clippers beat the Warriors, which I would anticipate at home in the 9-10 play-in game, and then go on the road and beat Phoenix in the other play-in game for the 8th seed, well, then Miami will actually move up. Because Phoenix finished the year with 44 wins, Miami 43. So if the Blazers and Clippers move into the playoffs and the Suns move into the lottery, Miami would then go up a spot with both Los Angeles and Portland making the NBA playoffs as the 7 and 8 seed, which would give Miami the 12th spot in the lottery, which dramatically improves their odds to move up potentially. You go from 4.8% for top 4 to 7.4%, and then you increase your number 1 overall likelihood by 0.5%, going from 1% to 1.5%. So it is a very narrow golden path where you have to obviously miss the playoffs by losing in the play-in. You have to have the Blazers beat the Suns on the road, and then you have to have the Clippers win against the Warriors at home, and then go on the road to beat the Suns in the next play-in game. It's unlikely, but that is the golden path to get the 12th spot in the lottery. Let me know. Pin comment on today's show. Do you want the Heat to make the playoffs? I know a lot of people are looking towards the draft and the lottery. That's why we started with talking about the Heat odds right now. But pin comment on today's show, do you want the Heat to make the playoffs? Type Y for yes or N for no. I'm in the camp of no. And I know there are a lot of people out there that says, hey, I'm rooting for the Heat to win every game, and I want them to be in the playoffs every year. And that's your right. And I'm not going to tell you that that's the wrong way to go about this. But I'm just sick and tired of being in the play-in. I'm sick and tired of being the 8th or 7th seed and having to play the 2 top teams in the East in the first round of the playoffs. Last year, we got embarrassed in crazy fashion by the Cavaliers. 2 years ago, we lost in 5 games to the Boston Celtics. And I think if we ended up winning against the Hornets and then the loser of Orlando and Philly, we would lose in 5 games as the 8th seed to the Pistons and end up with the 15th overall pick. And I don't think that really benefits anybody here, as Miami completely needs to reshape the roster and add an influx of talent, high-level athletes on the perimeter, whether it be wings, backcourt, and I think you're more suited to do that if you get a lottery pick, and obviously you get that slim chance to move up into the top 4, where you could get an AJ DeBansta, a Darren Peterson, a Cam Boozer, a Caleb Wilson potentially. So I do end up hope that Miami is in the lottery. But coming up in just 1 second, we're going to take a look at an early Heat Hornets play-in preview. But first, let's tell you about today's sponsor. The playoff push is heating up, and there's no better way to cash in if you're right on the high-flying hoops action than Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Every bucket, every dime, and every win means more when you're playing on Prize Picks. And with their brand new Team Picks market, you can now pick game winners, spreads, and totals on top of the player picks you already know. So cash in if you're right during all the clutch buckets, slam dunks, and Cinderellas this spring with Team Picks on Prize Picks. My favorite thing about Prize Picks, the versatility you can play with. You can go basketball. You can also go season long on football already, like I have here. More on Myles Garrett sacks, more on Puka Nacua touchdowns, and more on Bijan Robinson rushing yards. Download the Prize Picks app today and pick your first game winner, spread, or total as the playoff push rolls on. And get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup when you use code CLNS. That is code CLNS to get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Prize Picks Predict is a registered FCM offering team picks and culture picks as event contracts. Trading involves significant risk, not for all. The content provided is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, a recommendation to trade any commodity interest, or an offer to open an account. Chat Sports is not registered with the CFTC or NFA. Prize Picks Predict does not endorse or guarantee any statements made by third-party promoters or influencers. Please consult with a qualified professional before making any trading decisions. As we transition to talk about the Heat Hornets 9-10 play-in game, Miami finished the year 43-39. Charlotte one game better at 44-38. This game will actually be being taken place on Tuesday. Now, I have said a lot that the 9-10 play-in game is on Wednesday. That is the usual time for the 9-10 game because they want to give that one extra day of rest to the teams that finish higher as the 7th and 8th seed. But because Philadelphia is hosting that play-in game and they share an arena with the Philadelphia Flyers, an HL team, they are unable to play on Tuesday night, so they have to play at Wells Fargo on Wednesday, which means Miami and Charlotte is the 9-10 game. And if the Heat were to win this game, they would then get an extra day of rest, being off Wednesday and Thursday before having to fly to either Orlando or Philly to play the loser of that 7-8 game on Friday evening for the right to be the 8th seed in the playoffs. So that game will be happening on Tuesday night. We'll have a full preview of that on tomorrow's episode, so stay tuned for that. But I did want to just take an early look at this matchup for the Heat and Hornets. And I think it's going to start right here. Well, the Heat and Hornets, obviously divisional opponents in the Southeastern Division. Miami is 3-1 against Charlotte this season. Now, with that being said, very different teams between the first 2 times the Heat and Hornets matched up compared to now. The first 2 games between Miami and Charlotte, first one came all the way back in late October, and the second one came in either late November, early December. So certainly not the same 2 teams that are playing over the last month and a half. The 2 meetings the Heat and Hornets have had since the All-Star break, Miami went on the road and beat Charlotte by 8 without Andrew Wiggins and Norman Powell. And then the second time they matched up about a month ago in Miami, Hornets came into the Heat's building and won by 30, outscored the Heat in that fourth quarter 40-18. But as I mentioned, this is 2 different teams. The Hornets have been really good since the All-Star break. They are 17-9 since the All-Star break, one of the top 10 records in the NBA since that point in the league year. Miami in that same time frame, 13-12. So since the All-Star break, Charlotte's been a top 10 team in basketball. Miami pretty mid, around that 16-18 range. But here's the real kicker when thinking about these two teams since the All-Star break. Charlotte, if you look at their advanced metrics here, guys, they have the second best offensive rating in the NBA since the All-Star break, 121.9. They have the seventh best defensive rating at 111.0, which sets them up for the fourth best net rating at 10.9. So this Hornets team has been a top 5 team in basketball, obviously not record-wise, but analytically since the All-Star break. Now Miami, conversely, also really good offensively, right? Sixth best offensive rating since the All-Star break. The difference is Miami's defense has fallen off a cliff. We've talked about this a ton. They are 22nd in defensive rating since the All-Star break, which sets them up for 16th in net rating, so slightly below average since the All-Star break. One key thing to look at in this one, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow, is the pace of this game. How is it played? Why do I say that? The Heat on the year are the number 1 pace team. Charlotte, 26. So the Hornets play much slower, more half court. Miami, they play quick, run and gun. We've known this. The third thing that is an early mention here, are the Heat going to be able to defend the rookie Kon Knueppel, the fourth overall pick out of Duke, 24.5 points per game this season, 3.8 rebounds against the Heat. And in those 4 games against Miami, where he's averaging 24.5 points a night, shooting 50% from the field and 45% from 3. We know Miami is going to have to match up with the trio of LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Kon Knueppel. You imagine that Bam is going to be in the front court with Kel'el Ware again. So Ware on Diabate. I'll say Bam probably guards Miles Bridges. Wiggins on Miller. But then you have 2 guys in Knueppel and Mitchell. Who do you have Tyler Hero guard if he remains in that starting lineup? Because he's not the best defender. You're going to have to find a way to hide Hero defensively because Knueppel, LaMelo Ball can really expose Hero's lack of defense on the outside. And the final thing for Miami, if the Heat want to win this game and keep their season alive for another game, Bam Adebayo has to be the best player on the floor. Now, I think if you asked everybody in the NBA currently who is the best player in this game, I think most people would say it's Bam. I think people realize that his defensive impact, he's a more winning player than LaMelo Ball and everybody over there. But he has to play like that. Like, if LaMelo Ball is the best player in this game, the Hornets are going to win. If Kon Knueppel is the best player in this game, the Hornets are going to win. I would argue if Tyler Hero is the best player in this game, it still probably bodes well for Charlotte. Because when Bam is clicking on all cylinders and playing well, the Heat are a hard team to beat because he can do it on offense by killing you inside in the mid-range from 3, but also be such a difference maker defensively. So if the Heat want to win this game, they're going to have to defend Kon Knueppel. They're going to have Bam Adebayo be the best player on the floor in this game. And we'll have a more extensive and thorough preview tomorrow on the channel. Subscribe and be on the lookout for that. We'll also be live for the game on Tuesday night. Could be the last game of the Heat season. Could be a win and move on game for Miami as well. Subscribe and lock us in.